I'm standing on the crowded L train, the cold Chicago wind still nipping at my ankles. And I'm holding my husband David's phone in my hand. I didn't know it was his until the screen lit up not with the picture of the hydrangeas my mother planted before she passed, but with a photo of David at a baseball game, grinning that boyish grin I used to adore. And then it happened. The phone buzzed. It was his sister, Sarah. I answered, thinking it was an emergency. But the very first sentence out of her mouth felt like a physical blow to my chest. "Hey, Mom wants to know if you've talked to Chloe about the condo yet. You need to sweet talk her into putting your name on the deed now before she changes her mind." I looked at my reflection in the dark, greasy window of the train. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. My heart wasn't just breaking. It was hardening into something cold and sharp. Sarah's voice continued, fast and sharp like a razor. Talking about my mother's house, the only thing I had left of her, as if it were nothing more than a payday. "Her mom is dead and her dad is gone," she said. "Who's going to step in and defend her?" I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not there, surrounded by strangers in suits and smelling of stale coffee. But in that moment, as the train crossed over the river, I knew my marriage was over. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, realizing the man I loved was the one waiting to push me off. I didn't know then that this was the beginning of the hardest fight of my life. But I knew one thing for certain. They picked the wrong woman to underestimate. You know? Darling's life has a funny way of showing you exactly what you need to see, right when you're too busy to look for it. That morning, I was a whirlwind. I'm 32, but I felt 50. I'd been at my PR firm for 6 years, working in the shadows, waiting for my turn to lead. I had a pitch that morning that could change everything: a bonus, a promotion, a bit of breathing room. I'd only managed one bite of my bagel before I was out the door. David and I had the same phone, same clear case, sitting right there on the charging station. In my rush, I grabbed a simple mistake. Or maybe, looking back now with the wisdom of a grandmother's heart, it was my mother watching over me from wherever she is, making sure I finally heard the truth. David and I had been married for 3 years. To anyone at church or in our building, we were the stable couple. No screaming matches, no slammed doors. I thought that was enough. I thought a quiet house meant a happy one. My mother, bless her soul, had been so worried before she passed. She was terminally ill, her hands so thin they felt like bird wings. And she'd pull me close and whisper, "Chloe, a woman needs a place to stand. Keep that condo in your name. It's your safety net. If life gets stormy, I want you to have a roof that no one can take away." At the time, I'd cry and tell her she was overthinking. I'd tell her David was a good man. I'd tell her his family was decent. How naive we are when we're in love, thinking that a wedding ring is a shield against greed. Sitting on that train, listening to Sarah talk about selling my mother's house to buy a big house in Naperville so she could open a basement beauty salon. It felt like they were digging up my mother's garden and paving it over with concrete. "Don't be a pushover, Dave," Sarah hissed through the phone. "Mom said she was a good catch because of the real estate, but her family is practically non-existent. It would be a waste not to utilize what she has." The word utilize. Like I was a piece of equipment. Like I was a tractor or a lawnmower they'd acquired in a trade. Have you ever felt that, honey? That moment where you realize you aren't a person to the people you love, but a resource. My ears were ringing so loud I could barely hear the automated voice announcing the next stop, and then she mentioned the money. The $80,000. My mother's life insurance. My mother's life savings. Money she'd scraped together working extra shifts as a nurse. Wearing the same winter coat for 10 years so I could have a college fund. Sarah was telling David to play the romantic angle to get his hands on it. "She's a softie," she said. She cave. I felt a coldness settle into my bones that hasn't left me to this day. It's the kind of cold that makes you see very, very clearly. I remembered 6 months ago, when David wanted $40,000 for a woodworking shop with a friend who I later found out was drowning in debt. I'd said no, and David didn't talk to me for a week. He'd pouted like a child, and Lord help me, I felt guilty. I felt like I was being unsupportive. I actually apologized to him for protecting my mother's legacy. Isn't that what we do as women? We apologize for having boundaries. We apologize for not letting people walk all over us. Sarah, I finally said. My voice was a whisper. But it cut through her chatter like a knife. The silence on the other end was so heavy you could have dropped a brick on it. I could almost hear her heart stopping. Chloe, is that you? Why do you have Dave's phone? I heard everything, Sarah. Every single word. No, Chloe, listen. I was just joking. You know how Mom and I are? We just talk nonsense. A joke. Isn't that always the excuse? When someone shows you their black heart and you catch them, they call it a joke. They call you sensitive or dramatic. But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being awake. I told her right then, with the train doors opening at my stop, that not a single brick of that condo belonged to the Miller family. I told her that money was mine to spend, keep or burn as I saw fit. And then I hung up. I walked off that train and I didn't look back. But the shaking. Oh, the shaking in my hands wouldn't stop. I had to go to work. I had that pitch. Can you imagine? Your whole world has just turned into ashes. And you have to walk into a glass boardroom and talk about market metrics and brand identity. But that's what we do, isn't it? We carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, and we don't let a single tear ruin our makeup. My manager, Bill, saw me and asked if I was okay. He said I looked like a ghost. I just smiled and told him I needed coffee. But inside, I was repeating my mother's words. It's your safety net. I realized then that my mother wasn't just giving me a house. She was giving me the permission to leave a man who didn't deserve me. During the pitch, David's phone, which I still had, was buzzing in my bag like a trapped hornet. Text after text. Chloe, pick up Sarah, was talking nonsense. I'll explain everything tonight. He was already building his cage of lies. He didn't know I'd already found the key. And then my best friend Jessica called my personal phone. She's been my rock since the 3rd grade. She told me she was at a Starbucks near our apartment and saw David, his mother, and Sarah together. She overheard them. They weren't sorry. His mother was telling him to grovel and play the victim. She told him a woman in her 30s with no family wouldn't dare leave her husband. She thought I was trapped by my own loneliness. That was their biggest mistake. They thought being alone meant being weak. But there is a great power in a woman who has nothing left to lose but her dignity. I got home at 7 p.m. The lights were all on. It looked like a staging area for a war. David, his mother, and Sarah were all on my sofa. They had fruit sliced on a plate, acting like they were welcoming me home to a cozy family chat. My mother-in-law, a woman who had never once asked me how I was feeling after my mom died, had the audacity to smile and say, "Chloe, let's clear the air." I didn't even take off my coat. I stood there, feeling the weight of my mother's keys in my pocket. I asked David one question. Have you ever thought about asking me to put your name on the deed? The way he bit his lip, the way he couldn't look me in the eye, that was my answer. He tried to talk about joint assets and our future. But I knew our future was just a code word for my money. When Sarah chimed in, calling me selfish for not helping her family, something in me snapped. I looked at that woman who wanted my mother's hard-earned legacy to pay for her life, and I felt a wave of pity. The crime, I told her, is wanting to build your stability on the foundation of my dead mother's house. I walked into my bedroom and I grabbed a suitcase. I'd already decided. I wasn't going to spend another night in a house where I was being appraised like a piece of livestock. David tried to block my way. He put his hand on my suitcase, the same hand I'd held at the altar. I looked at that hand and I didn't feel love. I felt skin and bone and betrayal. "Take your hand off my bag," I said. It wasn't a scream. It was a command. My mother-in-law started talking about what the neighbors would think. She talked about embarrassing the family. But I told her the truth. This family lost its dignity the moment they sat down to plot how to steal from a grieving woman. I walked out. The elevator doors closing felt like the first breath of fresh air I'd taken in 3 years. I went to Jessica's. She didn't ask questions. She just made me soup and let me cry. but they weren't the kind of tears that weaken you. They were the kind that wash your eyes so you can see the path ahead. The next morning, met Laura, a lawyer with eyes like a hawk and a heart of gold. She told me the law was on my side. Premarital assets, inheritances. They stay with the woman. But she warned me, the legal part is easy. The emotional part is the battlefield. She was right. David and his family didn't go quietly. They followed me. They showed up at my condo, the one my mother left me. I stood behind the glass door of the lobby and watched them. My mother-in-law called me a dragon for hoarding my house. David demanded $100,000 to buy him out of a 3-year marriage. Can you imagine the gall, darlings? Asking for a $100,000 payout for the service of being a husband. I laughed. I actually laughed. I told him he appraised his services quite high for a man who spent his marriage funneling his own paychecks to his mother while I paid the rent. That was the turning point. I started digging. I found 3 years of bank statements. I saw the thousands of dollars David had been saving by sending it to his mother's account. He'd been preparing for this. He'd been siphoning off our life together while I was busy trying to build a home. When we got to the mediation room, T played the wounded puppy. He told the mediator he loved me. He said I was being manipulated. And then my lawyer, Laura, pressed play on the recording I'd made on the train. She played the recording of him demanding $100,000. The silence in that room? Oh, it was delicious. David's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. 3 weeks later, it was over. The judge ruled in my favor. I kept my condo. I kept my mother's money. And David. He walked away with exactly what he brought into the marriage. Nothing but his own greed. I live in that condo now. I painted the walls a soft cream. I have my hydrangeas on the balcony. I'm a team lead at my firm now, and I don't work in anyone's shadow. Sometimes I still see a man who looks like David on the street, and my heart flutters for a second. But then I remember the sound of that voice on the train. I learned something through all that pain. Something I want to share with you. A woman's safety net isn't just about money or bricks and mortar. It's about the knowledge that she is enough on her own. It's about knowing that love should never cost you your peace of mind. If you're sitting there today, feeling like someone is trying to chip away at your worth, I want you to remember my mother. I want you to remember that you have a right to stand your ground. Don't apologize for being strong. Don't apologize for protecting what you've worked for. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to find your safety net? Have you ever had to stand up to people who thought you were an easy mark? Let's talk about it. Because we aren't alone. We're just standing on our own 2 feet. And remember, honey, it's never too late to come home to yourself. You are the deed to your own life. Don't ever let anyone else sign their name to it. God bless you and keep your heart brave. I'll see you in the next story.